So Iran have just sent a huge shipment of oil to Syria. Okay, I'm just going to read you the headlines and then we'll break it down. All right. So this is from Sharq al-Awsat from April 4th. They say Iran sends oil shipment to Syria. All right. And they cite tanker trackers. Now, this website, they also have a Twitter account. I'm just going to show you what they posted because that's the original source. They've been tracking these vessels. Okay. And they say that Iran tankers with 3 million barrels of crude oil are headed to Syria. And again, I love this part, defying U.S. sanctions, as if like that's international law or something. Let me just show you the picture, right? So you have to consider they've went through the Strait of Hormuz, and then they're going all the way up the Suez Canal into the Mediterranean and then to Syria. And they're going to this refinery over here, which is located in Tartus. Tartus is on the coast in Syria, right? So on the Mediterranean, not too far from Cyprus, right? And the refinery is the Banyas refinery. That's where these ships are headed. And they just arrived, okay? So they set out a week ago, and now they've arrived there. And going back to tanker trackers, they're saying, this is April 8th, they're saying the first 900,000 barrels are currently discharging into the Banyas refinery in Syria. This should yield around 57 million liters of gasoline and potentially another 40 million liters of diesel, along with millions of liters of other products such as heating oil, etc. And keep in mind, there's more coming, right? Because they've split the shipment into, I think, 3 ships. So they're saying another 1 million barrels of crude oil should arrive sometime early tomorrow. And then another 1.3 million barrels of Iranian crude oil has exited the Suez Canal. And they talk about the name change. And apparently, again, I don't know if this is true, but they might have a Russian escort, which wouldn't surprise me because, you know, the Russians, they have a huge naval base right here in Tartus. And they've had that since 1971, 1973. I always mix up that bloody date, but it's been there for a long time, right? And again, it's so funny when you hear people claiming that, you know, like you hear the American media and politicians talking about Russia inside of Syria. Russia has the right to be in Syria, and the only reason they're in Syria is because of you, because you've been trying to effectuate regime change, sending jihadists over and propping up armed militias. Russia, you know, they had a naval base, but it was, dude, it was crumbling. Do you know? Because it's so funny because you hear these Americans talk about like as if the biggest tragedy of the Syrian war is that Iran and Russia have more influence in Syria now because of that. Well, I mean, even if that were true, it's your fault because, you know, the Russian base in Tartus was crumbling. Right now, it's state of the art. They rebuilt the entire thing. I saw a report, you know, it's completely revamped. And that's because Russia is helping to fight the terrorists that have been supported by Saudi Arabia, by Qatar, by Israel, by Turkey, by the United Kingdom, by the United States, right? We wouldn't need them and their presence if we didn't have, you know, 50 flavors of jihad coming to take over the country. Their base was, you know, yeah, sure, it's strategic base. Let's not kid ourselves. They want access to the Mediterranean. No shit. But, I mean, nowhere near comparison. So anyway, just a small tangent. I just want to go back now to the oil because, you know, I think this is hilarious how the mainstream media are talking about this because if you look at this article over here from Fox, okay? Here we go. So again, in the headline, what do you see? They're defying U.S. sanctions. And, you know, down here, they say that Syria has been struggling with an oil shortage, relying primarily on Iranian help. However, with the burdening sanctions on the two countries, the shortage has turned into a crisis, causing power outages and rationing petrol. Well, thank you so much for actually mentioning the goddamn sanctions. How nice of you. What you left out, however, right? What you left out is the fact that the oil fields Yeah, they're controlled by the United States. I mean, 90%. 90% is a pretty significant figure. I mean, even if one oil field were controlled, that's still illegal. Like, what are you doing there? Get the hell out. But 90%, again, this is from March 20th. This is the Syrian oil minister, right? Bassam, I'm not sure if I'm saying his name correctly because it's been Romanized here, but Bassam Toma, he said that 90% of Syrian oil is under the control of U.S. forces, right? And he called them pirates, which I think is quite accurate because, you know, and again, this figure, he says that the total and indirect, so both direct and indirect losses of the Syrian oil sector had exceeded $92 billion. Think about that, right? You need to remember something. You know, Syria, I mean, if you compare Syria to other countries, Syria is not a major, you know, oil producer at all. Compared to Iran or Venezuela, no. If you go and look at, here's a list of top oil producers, right? I mean, Syria does not even register on the list. Here. Look, I mean, pick any one you like, even before 2010 or 2011. Syria is nowhere. It can't even compete with Iraq, Iran, Saudi Arabia. Nonetheless, pay attention. Despite the fact that Syria is not a huge oil producer compared to other countries, that doesn't mean it doesn't need the oil, right? And it certainly doesn't mean that the United States has a right to steal it. And as I've told you many times before, you know, 25% of government revenue in Syria in 2010, 2011 was coming from oil. I mean, just think about how many social programs, public infrastructure you can fund with that, right? 25% of the government's revenue. That's enormous. That is huge. And I mean, even if you took that away in peacetime, that's a disaster. Never mind during a war. And you know what's happening in Syria right now? I mean, it's heartbreaking. By the way, I just had some pictures over here, right? So of the occupation. I mean, look at them. They're just like, just parked like goddamn pirates on top of the oil. I mean, they have no shame, honestly. They have zero shame. But, you know, Vanessa Beeley, she's in Damascus. And I was talking with her the other day, or the other week, rather, for my show, and about sanctions. And I mean, look at this video. I just want to show you a video over here that she posted. This is from January, right? January 15th. I mean, just look at this queue over here of people waiting for fuel in Damascus. Like, I've never seen that in my life. That was not a thing, okay? And the same goes for the bread lines in Damascus. That's not a thing. I mean, the only bread line you would see is, you know, people queuing up because they're waiting their turn, not because there's no bread. And, you know, it's insane. And that's not all, by the way. If you look at also on the coast, ironically, in Tartus, just one second, I'm getting you some more pictures, right? Of queues, people queuing up. Look, this is from last week. Look at the size of that queue, of that, you know, that line. This is insane. This is insane. Here, this is also in Tartus. Look, people just queuing up for fuel. I mean, do you know what the prices are as well? Because of not just the occupation, the sanctions as well. You know, people in Syria, they buy these blue cans of gas. You know, you put them under the stove, under the hob. You know, gas cooking. And I mean, if I recall correctly, what did Vanessa tell me? It costs tens of thousands of Syrian pounds now. Tens of thousands of Syrian pounds. Like, no, who can afford that? Who can afford that? You got to keep in mind, before the war started, $1 is like 60 Syrian pounds. $1, 60 Syrian pounds. Now it's 4,000. The currency, the hyperinflation, it's killing people, man. It's killing people. And, you know, they act like Iran trying to help Syria, given these conditions, is an act of disrespect to the United States. Like they're defying US sanctions. Bitch, they're both already under sanctions, both of them. What are you going to do? Sanction them more? Go fuck yourself. You know, Iran is under 1,500 different sanctions. There are more US sanctions on Iran alone than all other countries combined. Okay, that's how much the United States hates Iran. Despicable. And remember, what was the coup about in 1953 in Iran? Which was the CIA and MI6, the British and the Americans and the British working together. All about oil, right? Because Mossadegh, he nationalized the oil. Like, oh, you nationalize the oil? You're going to kick out the Anglo-Persian, also known as the Anglo-Iranian, nowadays known as BP, British Petroleum Company, out of Abadan, the largest oil refinery in the world. We're going to come and coup you. That's how these people think. It's a mafia, right? And so when you circumvent, you know, their aggression, they perceive it as a threat, like as a act of disrespect. How dare you defy U.S. sanctions? Fuck your U.S. sanctions. Like, what do you think that is? That's law in Syria or law in Iran? Like, it's not just with Syria. You look at Venezuela, you know, Venezuela again has huge oil reserves, crude oil, which the United States would love to get its hands on, right? And their infrastructure is, I mean, it's been decimated. So they can't refine all of it. So what do? They send gold to Iran, and Iran sends them fuel, right? Gasoline. So what did the United States do? They went and pirated some of the ships coming from Iran, which were private ships, actually. So actually, they stole them from private citizens, which is even more pathetic. And then what did the UK do? The UK is like, oh, you're paying Iran in gold to get fuel? Okay, we're going to take away your gold. And so you have this court case going on right now in London, because the Bank of England have taken hostage about $1 billion worth of Venezuelan gold. Again, the estimates roughly vary roughly, but it's over $1 billion. And at one point, Venezuela was even like, yo, we don't even want the money given to us directly. Give it to the UN so we can get medical supplies, so we can combat COVID-19. And the opposition, which is propped up by the UK and the US, were like, no, we don't accept that. So they purposely withheld money that was going to be used solely for humanitarian purposes, right? Because what is the reasoning behind this? I mean, they say that, oh, we can't trust you with the money because you're a corrupt regime. Well, whether you like it or not, it's still the Venezuelan people's money. It's not yours. It's their gold. And the second thing, the way they tried to frame it was the British government was like, well, we don't know who's the legitimate government of Venezuela. Is it Guaido or Maduro? So, you know, better take it to court. Like these people are so sick. They know that people are dying in Venezuela, that the infrastructure is crumbling. And when they find ways to circumvent the sanctions, like just to get fucking fuel, like this is basic infrastructure, they go and shit on them even more. Like this is what the United Kingdom does. This is what the United States does. They're a mafia. They're evil. It's disgusting, right? They want to take your resources, and if you don't give them your resources, they will take it by force. Literally, like pirates. They're occupying Syria's oil fields like pirates. They're stealing ship cargo like goddamn pirates. And they went and sold us off, right? Donald Trump, Joe Biden, They sold off all this confiscated, this stolen, this pirated oil from Iran. I mean, they're pirates. I'm speechless. And so they lose it. They can't stand it when Iran is giving the finger and going and helping Venezuela, going and helping Syria. They can't stand it. They lose their minds. They hate this. And they try to portray it as some kind of act of evil, which is hilarious, honestly. Like, how dare you trade? What do you think you are, independent countries? And look at the comment section in Fox News. It's I mean, it's not loading now for some reason, but I think I pointed it out on Twitter. Yeah, give me a second. I'll get it for you. It's exactly what you would expect. It's exactly what you would expect. Okay. Hold on. Yeah, look at this. Unreal, honestly. This guy's saying this would have never happened with Trump still in office. Now it will be the norm. Most likely the nukes will be up by summer. And then this person saying Iran is giving Syria the oil they need, but the US is paying for it. And then the only person who has like a tiny bit of common sense and says that Syria has its own oil, they downvoted. I mean, that comment section was cancer, honestly. And it's hilarious how they think that Trump is better, but their version, their idea of better is starving Syrians, depriving them of fuel. If Trump was in office, Syrians would never be able to have fuel in their cars. They never allow such a thing. Like, do you listen to yourself? Who the fuck are you? Who is Trump? Like, go mind your goddamn business. They think that this region belongs to them. Like, it's so insane how this imperialist mentality is ingrained in the way they think. It's unbelievable. It's frightening, honestly. Because, you know, it's one thing having corrupt politicians, but like you see so many people, just your average Joe. Again, I know not everyone is like this. I don't think most people are cruel, but you see a significant amount of people who are genuinely, you know, indoctrinated with white man's burden and, you know, American exceptionalism and this imperialist mentality. They think that the ground they walk on is, you know, is holy and that they are better than everyone else and they should run affairs for Iran and Syria on the other side of the planet. It's insane. It's insane. And they don't even realize that Biden is just like Trump. That's what's the most hilarious thing. That is what is most hilarious. They don't even understand it. And yeah, I just want to read you. This is from Arab News, okay, and this is from March 16th, so just a few weeks ago, right? Look what they're saying here. They're saying that the Syrian pound continued to plunge against the dollar on the black market after it hit a record low of 4,000 to the dollar this month. That is incredible. Heartbreaking, man. And they're saying the pound, the Syrian pound, officially valued at 1,256 to the greenback, to the dollar, was selling for around 4,200 on the black market on Tuesday, right? The economic crunch has seen food prices skyrocket over the past year in a country where the majority of the population lives below the poverty line. Yeah, 90%. 90% of Syrians are living in poverty. 60% are food insecure. And you know, I just think it's insane that, again, one more thing, Syria used to produce almost 400,000 barrels of crude per day before the war. And, you know, they have no problem depriving people of heating fuel, petrol, cooking gas. Like, how is that punishing Assad? Can someone explain that to me? Like, my cousins that are still in Syria, in you know, government-controlled areas, who can't buy, who can't afford, rather, you know, they can't afford the same commodities as before: gas, heating oil, bread. Can you explain to me how that punishes Assad? Explain that to me. And even then, this is if you accept that it's okay for the United States to impose its politics on another country, like to punish another country's leader for what? It's not your country. But anyway, just like just to play literally devil's advocate, like how does that affect, accomplish anything? It doesn't. They know damn well. I'm telling you, these people have fucking droids, robots who sit down and calculate every scenario. They know exactly by how much they're going to screw the pound. They know exactly by how much, the Syrian population is going to be deprived of basic necessities and commodities. They've studied all of this. They know perfectly well what's going to happen. They know that people are going to die. They know people are going to be deprived of, their human rights, their access to resources, their own resources. They know this. And they do it anyway, right? And they try to sell it to you as like less violent than war. No, it's no different than war. It's literally war. I mean, just absolute scum. And so, I mean, I'm a bit wary usually of these kinds of articles because if you look at this one from Arab News, I mean, they're trying to make it out to be as if like the government is responsible for the fuel shortage. The government is trying to deal with a fucking disaster. I mean, what do you expect? They just mention sanctions and things in passing, but they still say like, oh, look what the government's doing. They're hiking the prices of subsidized gas, and therefore Syrians can't afford gas. Yeah, okay, but I mean, you're putting that out of context here. Why is the Syrian government doing that? Why is the Syrian government forced to take these harsh measures sometimes? Because they can't cope, right? And again, you have to excuse me because I majored in economics, but my memory's not as good as it used to be. So I'm not going to go into the details of it, but my point is that they talk about these things in a vacuum sometimes, and I'm talking about mainstream media. They come here and they either justify the sanctions. They say like, yeah, this is good. This is fine. It's punishing Assad. And then they ignore all the civilian casualties. Or they'll acknowledge that, yeah, civilians are suffering, but it's the government's fault, right? They do this with Venezuela as well. You see how in Venezuela, they try to blame all of the problems, on socialism, right? You'll hear that as well on Fox. Oh, look, this is socialism. No, it's you attacking socialist countries. And, they'll say that all of the shortcomings are the government's fault. Now, yeah, look, man, no country is perfect. Let's be clear about that. There are lots of mistakes, lots of errors made before these wars started. But you can't come here and tell me that that's the main cause. It's not. Absolutely not. That's such a whitewashing of crimes of imperialism, right? It's just victim blaming. That's what it is. And they know damn well that they're killing people. So they have to, sell you this bullshit propaganda to make you feel better about what your government is doing. It's horrendous, honestly. It's absolutely horrendous. Again, the blue can of gas that I was talking about, the gas canister. I mean, this is... I can't even imagine that this is worth thousands of Syrian pounds now, right? This used to cost nothing. In Syria, you have a donkey or a mule, like a beghel, that literally rolls up to your door, like in the street, selling gas or watermelons. You have different kinds of street vendors and stuff. Like this was a basic commodity, and now most Syrians can't even afford that. I'm not talking about fuel for the cars only. I'm talking about, again, like cooking, gas for your stove or heating oil. Like all these things for years now. This is not new, huh? This didn't just start now. But it just goes to show you again how Biden is just as evil as Trump. They know full well that these sanctions are killing people and depriving them of basic necessities. They're continuing them. They don't give a shit. And they try to tell you that this is, the fact that there's no food or fuel is because Russia won't allow jihadists in Idlib to take all of the UN aid. And again, just as Vanessa Vili pointed out, notice how the sanctions are only on the Syrian government, which is, the most of Syria has been taken back now by the government, by the army, and that's where most Syrians live. So the majority of Syrians are suffering, right? But just notice how there are no sanctions in the Al-Qaeda controlled Idlib. There are no sanctions in the Kurdish area. There are no sanctions on ISIS, on Daesh. Interesting, right? I don't think anyone should be under sanctions, but it just shows you their double standard. And this, I'm so disgusted by this whitewashing, like how they try to blame everything on everyone except the West, right? Anyway, I think it's good that Iran is sending oil. You know, I think it really shows what Iran is made of. Like Iran itself, I told you, is under 1,500 different sanctions, and they're sending oil when they're also in need, right? The United States steals Iran. You know, the United States steals Syria's oil. Iran gives Syrians oil. And then they want to come around and tell us that this is illegal, that we're not allowed to do this, that the US is a force for good, that Iran is evil. Really? Who buys this nonsense? Not interested in your propaganda, honestly. So there you go, man.